For those who see, may your gifts always lead you back to the one who gave them. And for those who ache, don't we all? Which hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which entereth into that within the veil. Hebrews, chapter 6, verse 19. Prologue. London, England. Palace of Westminster. August 1885. Order! Order, I say! Shouts echoed in the dark-panelled chamber of the House of Commons. Every member stood, waving papers and thrusting insults. The press peered over the balconies, frantically scribbling every insinuation, backhanded compliment, and outrageous lie. Not that they could tell the difference. Ranald Alduri pushed through the crowd and stepped to the parliamentary lectern. Control. He must appear controlled. The muscle at his jaw betrayed him. Minister Corley continued. This is a bill to provide for the registration and regulation of travelling vans used as abodes. Surely the House can acknowledge that gypsies ought to be subjected to certain sanitary regulations. Hear, hear! From the right, fists pounded on the backs of the benches. Ranald's stomach clenched. He placed his hand on the insignia of the crown, the lion and the unicorn, gilded on the red leather of the dispatch box. The law. Decency would prevail. Surely they would see. Minister Corley inflated himself, pushing out his chest like the buffoon that he was. His voice was the punctuated thwack of a hammer. These roadside Arabs shamelessly flit about in our midst. Their children cannot function properly in our society and are brought up completely without restraint or information. They must be educated in the proper ways. He thrust his hand into the air, as if holding the sword of justice. If that were not reason enough, this bill would also prevent their particular infections from being carried from one end of Great Britain to the other. Ranald clasped his hands together to keep from strangling the man. I'm sorry to disagree, but this bill would do nothing but harass the Romany people. Parts of this bill speak of caravans being searched at leisure, even upon the suspicion of any moral infringement. I would ask my fellow members whether they would give up their freedoms and have their houses searched upon any man's whim. Have we sunk so low that we must enact race laws once again? From the right, voices erupted once more. They're black spots upon our horizon, reducing our own riffraff to their level. A voice called from the back. They do not consider lying and cheating to be sinful. They dabble in sorcery. A member from the left yelled. What are their religious views, if any? Order! Mr. Speaker scowled, red-faced. On the right, a member stood on a chair. There are reports of them poisoning the cattle and then bringing the cure for a hefty price. Order! Mr. Speaker pivoted, shouting at both sides of the chamber. There will be order! A member from the back shouted, Bound up in their nature is an insatiable love of plundering and gold. Do you dare defy the order? Mr. Speaker's voice rose, a boom over the chaos. His white hair shook as he jutted out his finger. Minister Corley will continue, and the rest of the gentlemen in this house will conduct themselves as their status requires or kindly leave the chamber. His frown carved a deep line in his face as he firmly sat. Minister Corley stared at Ranald, drawing out the moment. Gypsy life may find favour in the East, but in the West this system cannot thrive. A real Englishman hates the man who will not work and scorns the man who would tell him a lie. Perhaps my honourable friend has been too long in Scotland and has been jaded by the wild antics of the locals. Ranald felt heat creeping below his starched white collar. and something else that was very familiar. Rage. You would have us believe that we have the resources to search every caravan. Perhaps my most honourable friend is merely trying to insert a precursor into his true aims, reenacting the Egyptians' Act of 1554. Murmurs flew through the room. Have we not moved beyond the wrongful sentiments of such a time when being part of an ethnic community was punishable by death? Perhaps we should add, as Queen Mary did, that merely fraternising with gypsies should bring about the gallows. The whispers in the back surged. He drew out his words for effect. Perhaps we need only to look to the Diet of Augsburg, where it was declared law that whoever killed a gypsy was not guilty of murder. The room erupted once again. Mr. Speaker shot to his feet. Order! Minister Corley shuffled the papers before him. Perhaps my most honourable friend makes these outlandish points because there is something deeper driving his motivations. Indeed, let me see. If the House will direct their attention, I give to you Minister Alduri's certificate of marriage. Panic washed over Ranald, gripping him by the neck. The man wouldn't dare. If he did, his reputation was ruined, legally, socially, and every which way around. Minister Corley thrust the paper into the air. You will notice, of course, that this page is blank. That is because no legal record exists. My most esteemed members, Minister Alduri was never legally married to his wife. No British ceremony ever took place, sanctified by any British church. He narrowed his eyes. And now, most shocking of all, I reveal to you that the woman he took into his household was a common gypsy. Some say he participated in some sort of outdoor gypsy shenanigans, jumping a broom or a bride kidnapping. Outrage swirled through the room. Papers flew in the air, skittering across desks and the ceremonial mace. Ranald kept his gaze low, away from the scrutiny of the journalists. Hot laughter hit him like a slap from all sides. He pushed past the men crowding him and quit the room. The heavy oak door shut firmly behind him, but that did nothing to muffle their cruelty. Questions. He could still hear the incensed questions. How could someone of his status fall so low? Why not just have a tumble and be done? Their hearts are filth. Their language is low and violent, an insult to the ears. How could he actually bind himself to someone like her? Someone like her. How dare they presume to know what she was like? Ranald reached for the wall, forcing himself to focus. So many souls relied upon him now, and the money was almost gone. If these lawmakers had their way, there would be no end of destruction. Death had followed the Romany people all across Europe. It was a cloak they wore from the moment of their birthing. Ranald's mind slid back to the day when Elspeth's life had been snuffed out. Now he thought of the smells of that morning, the clove in his shaving lotion, the beeswax of the furniture polish used by the maids, and then the noises, the resounding, urgent knock upon the front door, and the distant sound of gunshots. His hands trembled so badly that he hid them in his pockets. No, the bill would not be taken to the House of Lords and then sent for royal assent. He would stop this monstrosity before it ever reached the third reading. Every tiresome dinner party and false smile had led him to this. Finally, he knew the chink in the monster's facade, the one who was responsible for Elspeth's death and the pressure to pass the bill. One key player was all he needed, the favoured son in Scotland. After he had him, the monster would crumble. By the time the division bell sounded and the bill was called to vote, the Romany people would be safe. He owed his wife's restless soul that. Making his way through the hallways and out onto the walkway bordering the Thames, his eyes searched the passers-by. There, the dark-skinned man, dressed as the perfect Englishman, staring into the river with an expression as murky as the water. Ranald went to the rail and pretended to study a boat. "Do it." 2 words. A slight nod, barely discernible, was the man's reply. Ranald stepped away and headed back into the lofty halls of Parliament. The members flooded out from the Commons, taking a recess. They jeered and scoffed like the spoiled children that they were. Ranald smiled, as if their words did not still cut him. As if he could not feel any more, which wasn't far from the truth. Only one thing would work now: brutality. The members had decided, not him. The blood that would be shed was on their lily-white hands. Chapter 1. Edinburgh, Scotland, August 1885. The glowing orange veins on the coal faded. The strong wave of the fire, the heat in the crumbling fireplace, had all but died. The light flickered, reaching for the torn hem of her dress, trembling over the scuff marks on her shoes. Shadows scraped over the walls, pulling at the ripped wallpaper like thieves. One last cinder split, sending up sparks that lingered before they fled. Light and dark. A contradiction, just like the fear that she felt. And the thing she thought but shouldn't. The smoke rolled upward, long grey fingers grasping for the mantle. "Da, I could get the 2 shillings if you wait." Panic rose like the smoke, twisting, curling, playing with her fears like a toy. "I just need a little more time." "Window tax won't wait, girl. Landlord's already keening down my neck like a bleeding banshee." He shoved another brick into the window frame. The wet mortar ruptured and fell to the floor. The cold Edinburgh wind blew through the gaping hole. Feya breathed deep, wanting to savour the smell of something fresh, hoping to catch a whiff of the wind that came from beyond this part of a city, somewhere where dreams weren't sold for a farthing. "Selfish, brutish, heart-lacking man." She said the words because she was used to them, not because they could make a difference. Nothing made a difference in the slums. You worked. You ate if you were lucky. You died. Wastrel of a government, squeezing us all like sporran oats. The curse died on her lips, paralysed from too much use. The wind brought tears to her eyes. The bite of it, the cold. How long since she'd really cried? She breathed in again, enjoying the pain in her lungs because she could feel it. "I should have taken us to Glasgow. There's better work there." Da's voice was full of the past and the things he'd already said 100 times. He stacked another brick, and then another, blocking out the belching chimneys of the tenement, the silver-brown waters of the port of Leith, and the ships they'd never sail on. Feya wanted to reach for the bricks and tear them away. Instead, she stood there like a fool, squeezing Ma's Scottish cross necklace in her hand. Ma would have thought of something by now. Ma always made a way. "Waste of a man I am, Feya, and no mistake. The same thing would have happened in Glasgow." Da smiled, despite his words. "They all told it to your ma, but she wouldn't listen. Not even when she had to sell her granny's brooch to marry me, pauper that I was." He put his hand on the side of his head. "And then, when we moved here, I sold the book she was so fond of reading to you." He stumbled back and sobbed. The sound cut her deep, rending and tearing like a broken saw. "Ma knew what she was doing. She loved you." Feya tested the words, hoping he wouldn't say anything more on the subject. "We're only going through hard times, that's all." Times so hard they had to block up the window because they couldn't pay the tax. They weren't even allowed light anymore. She reached for Da's arm. "Everyone here's fallen on the times hard." "Not everyone. Are you blind, girl?" He pulled away, his long black hair blowing like a madman's in the wind. "We've been cursed for a long time because of me." His dark eyes, wide and hazed, went to the empty whiskey bottles scattered on the floor. "The old tinkers were right. The first time I looked upon your ma's bonny red hair, the curse came." He stepped towards Feya and lifted a lock of her long hair. "And you with hair just like hers. But my darkness shows up in your eyes. And here, look close." He skimmed his calloused finger along the skin of her arm. "My kind whisper here in your colouring." He lowered his voice. "You'd be better off without me. Say it." Feya saw in his face everything that frightened her, everything she didn't want to be. "I won't, Da." "I can get it over with tonight." He laughed, a sound full of emptiness and the weight of misfortune. "Stop it!" She wanted to shake him. "I told you not to talk like that anymore." Da clutched her arm, pulling her so close she could smell the whiskey. "A knife's a friend to a man in a tight spot. I could wander down the wrong alley and have someone do it for me." He dug his finger into her side. "Right here." Feya winced and tried to pull away. "Don't say those things." Da tightened his grip. His eyelids drooped to slits and he seemed to forget what he was saying. "You'll do fine in this world because you always do what's right, don't you?" He stumbled and reached for more mortar. "My own strong girl." Anger fled in her cheeks, but anger she was used to. Her anger was the only thing keeping them alive.